This is the story of a girl named Emily. I'm going to tell you what happened to her one rainy evening that changed her life forever. It's not something she talks about much now, but when she told me this, I listened closely. And so should you. Because after this story, you might never look at funerals the same way again. Emily was 22, quiet, polite, and never the kind of person who believed in ghosts or spirits. She lived in a small town where everyone knew each other, and things were usually peaceful. But one morning, she got a call. Her Aunt Margaret had passed away. It wasn't a surprise. Her aunt had been sick for a while. Still, Emily felt sad. Aunt Margaret had raised her like a second mother. So, of course, Emily said yes when they asked her to help with the funeral. It was held at an old church on the edge of town. You know the kind. Gray stone walls, tall, windows with colored glass, and that strange silence inside. Like the building itself is holding its breath. The rain poured heavily that day, and thick fog rolled over the cemetery. Emily stood under a black umbrella, watching as her aunt's coffin was lowered into the ground. The funeral went as expected. A few speeches, some tears, and then everyone started leaving. But Emily stayed behind. She felt she hadn't said goodbye properly. So when everyone else had gone, she knelt by the grave, whispered her final words, and turned to leave. That's when she heard it. A soft knock. It was faint, almost too quiet to notice, but it was there. Knock. Knock. Coming from beneath the soil. Emily froze. She told herself it was just her imagination. Maybe rain hitting wood. Maybe a trick of the wind. But then, knock. Knock. Again. More desperate this time. Her heart jumped. She looked around, but there was no one left in the cemetery. Only the gravestones and that thick fog. Her aunt had been sick, really sick. There was no way she was still alive, right? Still, Emily couldn't shake the sound. She told the groundskeeper, an old man named Mr. Harris, who looked at her strangely but agreed to check the grave the next morning. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The sound of the knocking echoed in her mind, over and over again. Knock, knock. The next day, Mr. Harris called. He said they found nothing. The grave was untouched. He even opened the coffin. Aunt Margaret was there, cold, still, dead. But Emily couldn't forget the sound. Something wasn't right. She tried to move on, but strange things started happening. It began with the smell of flowers. Strong, sweet, and completely out of place. It followed her, into her house, her car, even her dreams. Then came the cold spots. She'd walk into a room and feel the temperature drop suddenly, as if someone or something was standing right behind her. Then came the voice. She was in the kitchen one night, making tea, when she heard it. A whisper, "Emily!" She turned, expecting to see someone there. But the room was empty. "Emily, don't leave me." It sounded like her aunt. The teacup slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. She backed into the wall, shaking. Her breath came in fast gasps. She wasn't imagining it. She heard it. Over the next few days, the voice returned again and again, always whispering, always sad, always close. Emily tried to ignore it. She went to church, she lit candles, she prayed, but it didn't stop. Then one night, something even stranger happened. She woke up around 3 a.m. and her room was pitch dark. Not just dark, unnaturally dark. No moonlight through the window, no soft glow from her nightlamp. Then she heard footsteps. Slow, dragging, coming from inside her room. She sat up quickly. Her heart thudded hard in her chest. Then came the whisper. "Why did you leave me? Emily, Why? And in that blackness, she saw a shape. A woman's figure. Pale face. Long, dark dress. Her aunt. But not as she remembered her. This version was cold, dead, eyes hollow with sadness. And something else. Something angry. Emily screamed and turned on the lamp, but the figure was gone. The next morning, she went back to the cemetery. She had to know what was happening. She found Mr. Harris and begged him to open the grave again. He said no. She insisted. Finally, with a deep sigh, he gave in. Together, they opened the grave. What they found still haunts Emily to this day. Inside the coffin, Aunt Margaret's hands were scratched. Deep marks were on the inside of the lid. Her fingernails were broken. Her eyes wide open in terror. She had been buried alive. Emily stumbled back, feeling sick. Her aunt hadn't been dead. Not at first. That explained the knocking. That explained the voice. That explained everything. Emily couldn't stop crying. The guilt crushed her. Her aunt had been calling for help, and she had walked away. That night, Emily lit candles all around her room and begged for forgiveness. She spoke out loud to the air, to her aunt, to whatever was listening. She said she was sorry, that she didn't know, that she would have done something if she had known. Then she waited, and for a long time, there was only silence. Then the flowers returned, that same sweet smell, and the voice came one last time. I forgive you, Emily. After that, the haunting stopped. The cold spots vanished. The whispers ended. Emily still visits the grave sometimes. She brings fresh flowers and sits for a while. She says she feels her aunt is at peace now. But sometimes when the wind blows just right and the fog rolls in, she swears she hears a soft knock from somewhere deep below the ground. And that, my friend, is the funeral horror story of Emily, the girl who walked away from a grave too soon. This is the story of a girl named Claire. I'm going to tell you what happened to her one cold autumn afternoon, and I want you to listen closely, because once I tell you, you might never feel safe at a funeral again. Claire was 25, working at a small bookstore in town. She was calm, kind, and a little shy. She liked reading ghost stories, but never believed in them. Not really. She always said, "They're fun, but they're just stories." That changed the day she attended the funeral of a man she had never met. It started with her boss, Mr. Langley. He was an older man who owned the bookstore and treated Claire like a daughter. One morning, he walked in looking pale and distant. "Claire," he said quietly, "I need to ask you for a favor." He told her an old friend of his, Mr. Harold Beck, had passed away. They hadn't spoken in years, but he felt it was right to go to the funeral. Only he was too sick to travel, so he asked Claire to go in his place. "Just show face, sign the guest book, maybe speak to the family," he said. Claire didn't want to go. Funerals made her uncomfortable. But Mr. Langley looked so sad, she said yes. It was in a tiny village 2 hours away. Claire took the bus through long, winding roads, past forests with trees already bare. The air felt heavier the closer she got. When she arrived, the village looked almost deserted. Small stone houses, no sound, not even birds. The funeral was held at an old church that looked forgotten by time. Its wooden doors creaked loudly when she opened them. Inside, only a handful of people sat scattered across the pews. Most looked tired, distant. At the front, the coffin sat closed, draped in dark velvet. Claire found a seat near the back and sat quietly. Then she noticed something strange. No one was crying. Not one tear. Just blank faces. No whispers. No prayers. It was as if they were waiting for something. The priest began to speak, but his voice was flat, hollow. "We are gathered here today to honor Harold Beck," he said. "May he find peace in the afterlife." Claire tried to focus, but she kept looking at the coffin. She felt this strange pull, like something behind those wooden walls was watching her. Then the wind outside picked up, and the church doors slammed shut on their own. Everyone turned, but no one said anything. Not even the priest. He just kept reading from his book. After the ceremony, Claire went to sign the guest book. That's when she noticed the names. Each one had been crossed out. Every name. Crossed with thick, black ink. All except one. Hers. She felt a chill crawl down her spine. A woman, tall and thin, walked up to her. Her skin was pale, lips grayish blue, and her eyes didn't blink. "Thank you for coming," the woman said. "Harold would be pleased." Claire forced a smile. "I'm here on behalf of my boss." They were friends. The woman stared at her for a long time. "You'll stay for the burial, won't you?" Before Claire could say no, the woman was gone. She didn't even see her walk away. Now listen carefully, because this is where things started to turn. Outside, the cemetery was foggy. The fog had rolled in so thick, you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Still, everyone followed the priest toward the open grave. Claire stood near the back, her shoes sinking slightly into the wet ground. She watched as the coffin was lowered slowly into the earth. Then, a whisper. She turned, but no one was close. Then she heard it again. "Claire." It came from the grave. She stepped back. Her heart raced. She looked at the others. No one reacted. They were just standing there, still and quiet, like statues. Then the coffin began to shake. Not just a little, violently, like someone inside was banging on it. Claire gasped. "Did you see that?" she whispered to the man beside her. He didn't answer, because he wasn't real. As she stared, his skin began to flake. His lips faded into his face. His eyes were sunken and black. Claire stumbled away, looking around in panic. Every person there was wrong. Their faces were pale, too pale. Their fingers were stiff, unmoving. Their mouths smiled but didn't breathe. They were not alive. And then she saw it, the name on the grave marker. Harold Beck. Born 1897. Died 1935. Claire ran. She didn't know where she was going, just away. The fog wrapped around her like a blanket. She could hear footsteps behind her, but when she looked, nothing was there. She found the church again and burst inside, slamming the doors shut. She leaned against the wall, gasping. Then she saw him, a man standing at the altar. Tall, dressed in an old suit, face pale and lined with age, but his eyes burned with something dark and cold. "Claire," he said. "You came." She shook her head. "Who are you?" "You came to my funeral," he said, smiling. "You signed the guest book." She backed away. "I came for someone else. I don't know you, but I know you now," he said softly. "And now, you're part of it." The walls of the church began to shake. The windows cracked. Candles blew out one by one. She turned and ran for the door. But when she opened it, there was only darkness outside. Not night, not fog, just blackness, like the world had disappeared. And then, silence. Claire woke up the next morning lying on the bus stop bench. The village was gone. No church, no cemetery, no houses, just trees and road. She called Mr. Langley, shaking. "I went," she said. "But the place, it's not there anymore." There was a long pause. Then he said quietly, "Claire, Harold Beck died 90 years ago. That village was abandoned decades ago. I just wanted to see if it was real." Claire never returned to that area. She never attended another funeral again. But here's the part that still keeps her awake at night. Sometimes, when she looks in the mirror just before bed, she swears she can see a pale man in an old suit standing just behind her. And on the table, by her front door, sits a guest book with only one name left uncrossed, hers. This is the story of a girl named Emily. I'm going to tell you what happened to her one rainy evening when she attended a funeral that changed everything. I need you to listen carefully, because this wasn't just any funeral. And once you hear what happened, you might never look at a coffin the same way again. Emily was 22, a nursing student in her final year, sweet, thoughtful, and a little curious about the unknown. She liked to walk in cemeteries sometimes, not in a creepy way, just to think. She said it helped her breathe, helped her feel peace. She believed in science, not spirits. That was until she got the letter. It arrived on a Monday, plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a card. "You are invited to the funeral of Margaret Ellis. Attendance is required." There was a date, a time, and a location. Hollow Creek, Chapel, a place she had never heard of. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She didn't know anyone named Margaret Ellis. But something about the words "attendance is required" unsettled her. Who writes that on a funeral invite? Emily showed it to her roommate, Jess. "Weird prank," Jess said. "Just throw it away." But Emily couldn't stop thinking about it. The location wasn't far, just a short drive out past the woods. Something inside her, curiosity or instinct, kept whispering, "Go." So she did. The chapel was deep in the forest, hidden down a dirt road. No GPS could find. Rain poured as she drove, the trees bending under the wind like they were trying to stop her. When she finally reached the gate, it creaked open on its own. The building looked ancient, made of black stone and covered in moss. Vines crawled up its walls like fingers reaching for something. There were no other cars outside. She hesitated, but she had come this far. Inside, the air smelled like damp earth and old wood. The pews were dusty, the candles flickering though. She hadn't seen anyone light them. And at the very front, under a stained glass window of a weeping angel, stood a lone coffin. Closed. Emily sat down near the back. The silence was heavy, like the air was watching her. She checked her phone. No signal. Then she noticed something strange. There were no photos, no flowers, no music. Just the coffin. No family, no friends. And yet, she didn't feel alone. A woman in a black veil walked in and sat down beside her. Emily hadn't heard the door open. "She's waiting," the woman whispered. Emily blinked. "Who?" The woman didn't answer. She simply stood up, walked to the front, and placed her hand on the coffin. "Wake up, Margaret," she said. "Your guest is here." Emily's heart began to race. "What are you doing?" she asked, standing. The woman looked at her, slowly lifting her veil. Her face was pale, too pale. Her eyes were sunken and hollow. Her mouth twisted in a smile too wide for her face. Emily backed away. And then, the coffin creaked. Just a little. A soft wooden groan, like something inside had shifted. "No," Emily whispered. "No. No, this isn't happening." The woman stepped back, and the coffin lid began to rise. by itself. Emily turned and ran for the door, but it slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. She screamed and banged on it, but it wouldn't open. The candlelight behind her flickered wildly. And then she heard a sound she'll never forget. Breathing. Not hers. From inside the coffin. Slow. Ragged. Like someone who hadn't taken a breath in years. Was breathing now. Emily turned slowly. The coffin was open. It was empty. The woman was gone. But the air had changed. It was colder. Thicker. She felt it before she saw it. A figure. Tall, with long, tangled black hair, and a face so pale it almost glowed. Her dress was tattered, soaked in mud, as if she had clawed her way up from the ground. Her fingers, too, long, her eyes, not human. The figure stepped forward. "Emily," she whispered. "You came." I don't know you," Emily stammered. "I got an invitation, but I think there's a mistake." "No mistake," Margaret said. "You were chosen." "Chosen for what?" Margaret smiled. "To take my place." The candles went out. Emily was plunged into darkness. She ran again, through the chapel, feeling her way along the walls. But the building had changed. The pews weren't where they'd been. The altar wasn't there. It was like the whole place had shifted. Then she saw a light. A single candle burning at the back. She followed it, her footsteps echoing in the dark. When she reached it, she saw a mirror. Her reflection wasn't moving. It stood perfectly still while she panted and trembled. Then her reflection smiled and whispered, "Now you understand." The floor beneath her cracked, and then nothing. When Emily woke, she was lying in a graveyard behind the chapel. It was morning. Rain had stopped. Everything looked normal. She stumbled to her feet, soaked and shivering. She found her car parked by the road, as if nothing had happened. She drove straight home, shaking the whole way. She told Jess everything. Jess didn't believe her. "Emily, you probably just had a nightmare or got sick or something. There's no Hollow Creek Chapel." "I Googled it. It doesn't exist," Emily insisted. "I was there. I saw her. The coffin opened." Jess looked worried but said nothing. That night, Emily stayed up late, trying to convince herself it was a dream. But then she heard something outside her window. Soft breathing. And a knock, not on the door, on her closet. She opened it slowly, holding her breath. Nothing there. But when she turned around, there, on her bed, was the invitation card. Same handwriting, same message. Only this time, a new line had been added. "You are now Margaret Ellis. The next guest will arrive soon." And on her nightstand, a fresh envelope sat waiting, with someone else's name on it. This is the story of a girl named Sarah. I want you to listen carefully, because what happened to her is one of those stories you don't forget easily, especially when it's about a funeral, of all places. Sarah was 24, a teacher's assistant in a small town. She was cheerful, full of life, and loved spending her weekends hiking alone in the nearby woods. She wasn't someone who believed in ghosts or spirits. She thought those were just stories people told to scare each other. But the night she attended, a funeral for someone she barely knew, everything she believed in changed forever. It started with a message she received on her phone late one evening. It was from a number she didn't recognize. The message was simple and strange. "You are invited to attend the funeral of Evelyn Harper. Your presence is requested. Come alone." Sarah was confused. She didn't know anyone named Evelyn Harper. She didn't remember ever hearing the name. She showed the message to her roommate, but Jess just laughed it off. "Probably some prank," she said. But something about the message felt wrong. The way it was worded, so direct and cold, made Sarah's skin crawl. Still, curiosity got the better of her. The funeral was set for the very next day at 6 in the evening, at an old chapel on the outskirts of town. The day passed slowly, and when evening came, Sarah decided to go. She figured she could leave if anything felt off. The road to the chapel was quiet, lined with tall, twisted trees that cast long shadows even in the dim light. When Sarah arrived, she noticed the chapel was older than she thought. Its windows were grimy, and the wooden door looked like it hadn't been painted in years. The front yard was overgrown with weeds and dead leaves. She stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and something else she couldn't place. Something metallic. The chapel was almost empty, except for a handful of people scattered here and there. No flowers, no music, just a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the floor. At the front of the chapel was the coffin, closed and covered in a faded black cloth. Sarah took a seat near the back. She tried to focus on the ceremony, but it was unlike any funeral she had ever been to. There were no prayers, no eulogies, no speeches, just silence, and the strange humming sound that grew louder and louder. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The coffin lid began to tremble, and Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Then, with a loud thud, the lid slammed open. Everyone gasped, but no one moved. Sarah stared. Inside, the coffin was empty. Then she noticed something even more terrifying. The coffin began to move, not by hand, but sliding across the floor toward her, as if something invisible was pushing it. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The humming turned into whispering voices, surrounding her. She tried to stand, but her legs felt frozen. The coffin stopped just in front of her. Then the lid slowly lifted again. This time, Sarah saw a pale hand reach out from inside. The fingers were long, thin, and covered in dirt. The hand grasped the edge of the coffin and pulled itself up. A figure climbed out. It was a woman. Her skin was pale like ash, and her hair was matted and tangled. Her eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to suck the light from the room. She looked straight at Sarah. "I've been waiting," the woman whispered, voice barely audible but sharp as a knife. Sarah tried to move, but her body wouldn't listen. The woman took a step forward. The humming turned into a deafening roar in Sarah's ears. "Why did you come?" the woman asked, her voice growing stronger. Sarah managed to whisper, I don't know. I got a message." The woman smiled, a sad, broken smile. "Then you are mine." Suddenly, the other people in the chapel stood up. But they weren't people anymore. Their faces twisted into masks of horror, their eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. They moved toward Sarah, closing in fast. She turned to run, but the doors slammed shut. The windows darkened, and the chapel transformed around her. The pews were gone, replaced by twisted roots and vines that seemed to grow from the floor. Sarah screamed, finally breaking free from her paralysis. She ran toward the door, pounding on it with all her strength, but it wouldn't budge. The pale woman came closer, reaching out with cold hands. "Join us," she whispered. Suddenly, Sarah felt herself falling backward into darkness. She woke up hours later on the cold ground outside the chapel. The sun was rising. The doors to the chapel were open, and the strange people were gone. Sarah ran home, shaking and covered in dirt. When she got inside, she looked at her phone. The message was still there. But now, it had changed. Below the original words, a new message had appeared. "You belong to Evelyn now." From that day, Sarah felt watched. She heard whispers when no one was around. Shadows moved just beyond her vision. She never told anyone what happened, afraid they'd think she was crazy. But sometimes, late at night, she could swear she heard a faint humming coming from somewhere deep inside her house. And she knew that woman from the coffin was still waiting for her to return. This is the story of a girl named Claire. You have to listen carefully, because what happened to her at a funeral will make you think twice the next time you're near a cemetery, especially when night falls. Claire was 23. She worked at a small-town library, loved books and quiet afternoons. She wasn't superstitious, never believed in ghosts or spirits. To her, funerals were sad but normal events, a way to say goodbye. But one funeral changed everything she thought she knew. It began with a phone call. It was late, just after Claire had finished work. Her phone rang, and when she saw the number, she didn't recognize it. Still, she answered. "Claire," a shaky voice whispered. "You have to come. It's about Aunt Lydia's funeral, tonight, at the old cemetery." Claire's heart skipped. Aunt Lydia? She didn't even know she had an aunt by that name. She asked, "Who is this?" The line went dead. Confused, Claire tried calling back. No answer. She thought maybe it was a prank. But something about the voice, so urgent and scared, stayed with her. She didn't know what to do. She had never met this Aunt Lydia, but the message was clear. Go to the funeral, that night. So, against her better judgment, Claire got in her car and drove to the cemetery outside town. It was a place she had never been before, a vast field of gravestones under tall, twisted trees. The sky was gray and heavy, like the weather knew something dark was about to happen. The funeral was simple. A small group of people gathered by a fresh grave. The air smelled of wet leaves and cold stone. Claire recognized no one. The coffin was plain, made of old wood and covered in dirt. The priest spoke softly, but his words didn't reach Claire. Instead, she noticed something strange. The flowers by the grave were dead. Not just wilted, completely blackened as if burned by frost. A chill ran down her spine. Suddenly the wind picked up. It wasn't just any wind. It whispered through the trees, carrying voices. Claire could almost hear her name, faint and soft. She looked around, but no one else seemed to hear it. Then, the coffin lid creaked. Everyone froze. Claire's breath hitched. The coffin lid lifted slowly, inch by inch. No one moved. Inside, instead of a body, there was darkness, a black void, swallowing all light. From the darkness, a hand emerged, pale, thin, and trembling like it hadn't moved in years. The hand grabbed the coffin edge and pulled out a figure. It was a woman. Her eyes were black holes, her mouth curved, in a sorrowful smile. Her hair flowed like smoke around her pale face. Claire wanted to run, but her feet were stuck. The woman looked directly at Claire and said, "You came." I don't understand," Claire whispered. The woman's smile deepened. "You were called." The ground beneath the grave cracked, and roots burst out, twisting like snakes around the coffin. Claire tried to scream, but no sound came. Suddenly, the crowd began to change. Their faces twisted into masks of pain and fear, their eyes glowing an unnatural red. They moved toward Claire, their hands reaching for her. The woman from the coffin stepped closer. "It's time." Claire struggled, trying to break free, but the roots wrapped around her ankles. She was pulled toward the open grave. Her mind raced. Was this death or something worse? Then, just as she was about to fall into the darkness, she remembered the library, the old books about spirits, curses, and protection. With the last of her strength, Claire pulled a small silver cross from her necklace and held it up. The woman screamed, a terrible, echoing sound. The roots loosened. The crowd vanished like mist. The woman recoiled, disappearing back into the coffin's dark void. The grave closed with a final thud. Claire collapsed to the ground, trembling and gasping for air. The sky cleared. The sun peeked through the clouds. She looked around. The cemetery was empty. No one remained. Claire drove home, her hands shaking on the wheel. For days, she couldn't stop thinking about what happened. Had it been real? A dream? Or something else? But one night, as she lay in bed, she heard the whisper again. Soft, almost loving. You answered the call, and Claire knew this was only the beginning.